So students often tell me they don't like reading, or reading is one of the most difficult parts of any class generally. This sometimes is because people aren't used to reading, or sometimes it's a language issue and it's because English is the second language and we're already dealing with rather difficult texts. So I'm trying here to show you some ways to simplify the matters. This isn't a way of cheating or anything like that. This is actually a way of doing what needs to be done without wasting your time. I don't know how people read. Most people read textbooks like they read fiction. So you start at the beginning, you go through it, and when you get to the end, you're done. The problem with that is you can't learn everything, and you can't retain everything from a philosophical text on one reading. And in most cases, specifically in our case, whatever we're reading this week, I guarantee was going to be very strange and very difficult. So the purpose of this video is to illustrate a couple of ways to do what's called strategic reading, or finding out what's most important from the text. And this can be done in any class. If your major is fire science or something like that and you have to read a technical manual, you're not going to read that from A to Z and memorize the whole thing. Of course not. So what are the best ways to approach reading a philosophical text? Well, first of all, you can't read all of the material in one sitting. Maybe you can. I'm just saying in general it's not a good idea. The idea is to break it apart. So the textbook is divided into sections which have subsections. So there's natural breaks that occur. And they're usually, generally, divided by topic. So you can work on one topic at one time or two topics or something like that. There's no reason to read the whole thing from start to finish unless you're an avid reader and this is fun for you. So break it apart. Second of all, you need to identify the goals that you have. This sounds silly, but it's actually really significant. At the end of each chapter, you have a quiz. The quiz is based on the terminology, so you should look through the terminology and understand that. At least review it before you take the quiz. There's nothing complex or strange there. That's just important. But you also have a set of homework questions, and you have a set of discussion posts. Why not start at the end of the module, read those, write them down, and see in the text where you think they might occur. You can definitely read the whole thing through and notice at least where the possible answer can be. Then you would have an idea of what you need to look for. And most importantly, summarize any material. That will be part of the explanation that I give you. So in the first module, it's chapter 1.3, I believe, there's a little bit about reading a philosophical text or reading philosophy, and the points here are used to illustrate that. So if, let's say it's whatever week we're on, I open up my objectives and I look through my objectives and I'm ready to go. I'm going to do my reading for the week. Well, again, don't do it all at once. Go to these homework assignment, look at what questions are being asked, and sort of mentally make a mental note about what you need to be looking for. And then start reading the text. Read the text from A to Z. Mark any places that you're confused. Mark any places that are unclear. You want as much as possible to get an idea of the main points of what the discussion is about, even if you don't understand them, even if you don't understand the words. And this is where taking notes is important. So you'd want to, if you had a printed out copy, that's ideal. You can take notes in the margin, you can circle important points, even if you don't understand them. So you read the text from A to Z, you get a general overview, you find the main points, you may be able to identify the answers or possible places for answers for your questions, and, most importantly, you identify any areas that are confusing, which may be a few, but don't really spend a lot of time digging into those yet. After your first reading, you at some point will need to reread. You're not going to read the whole thing again. I generally suggest students break this apart as much as possible. So if you read a section or two the first time and you're taking notes and you're identifying the main points and the parts you don't understand, you kind of walk away from it. Everybody's going to get burned out, and there's a certain amount of time that takes for each individual, but you can't do it all at the last minute, and you can't do it all on the first day. So when you come back to it, you'll have the points that you've identified as important and the parts that you're confused about. And you'll also, again, be reviewing the questions. So you can go back, and you don't have to read the whole thing. Start at the main points and start at the confusing points and say, well, what is the answer to this? This seems like it's important for Aristotle. Why is this important? What is explaining this point? That the best thing you can do at this point, as this is your second reading, you have not started from the beginning of the text. You're just sort of identifying the main points again, and trying to clarify any questions that you might have. The point here is to be able to summarize what's happening, what you've gotten out of it. So you have the main points identified, so you can summarize those and maybe answer the questions that you had previously. And this is a great time to ask your professor, well, I've looked over this and I'm not really clear on, Aristotle's concept of substance in this section. That's a good time to work on that. And again, at this point, it's possible you're able to answer the questions sufficiently, and maybe not. Maybe you need some more time to work through it. I do not suggest you read the text from start to finish more than once. It's such a time-consuming endeavor to do that. You need to read it for a general overview, but and again, this would apply to any textbook. If you read the whole chapter from beginning to end, a cursory reading, you set it down with some notes and some information, and you come back later and you identify the main points and the questions you have. And then, as much as possible, you would have to reread again just the sections to answer those questions. That's it. And again, each time you're doing this, you're taking notes and you're trying to summarize the main points in your own words. And in your own words means using examples that you understand, maybe to be honest, a lot of students reference, it's like this one episode of this one anime show that I saw, and this is what happens. I mean, it helps you remember it, sure. If you can use an example that helps you remember it, that's going to be easier in the long run. And the summary is intended not as a tool to, it's not intended as a tool to replace the text, but it definitely helps you if in a class that had an exam, for example, you could go back and read your summary and be like, that's what that chapter was about. And summaries are not long. They're just a few lines for each section that you're reading. So in any case, the point of reading more than once isn't because you're too dumb the first time to read it or something like that. It's to give your mind a break. And if you read the whole text and you get the overview and you come back later, days later, and you reread those sections for clarity, you'll get a different perspective on it. Ideally, doing that 3 times is the best, and that's the best way to retain information, and it's also the best way to not stress yourself out. So maybe you're setting aside 30 minutes, a day. Maybe you're setting aside more. That's more than enough time to work on this. Just do it more than once a week. Do it, every day or something like that. So what's the end goal here? The end goal is to answer the questions. Answer the questions at the end. I mean, if you're just purely pragmatic and you're just going for it, you can answer the questions, you can, identify the definitions, that's it. How do you know that you understand the material? Here's an easy one. Can you explain it to someone that's not in the class? If you live with a parent, or you have not really little kids, but older kids, or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's over, just say, I'm going to explain to you Aristotle's concept of substance. And if you can explain it to them without using all the jargon, you can just explain to them the basic concepts so that they can parrot it back to you and be like, I get it. I mean, it's weird, but I get it. That means you understand the material. The hardest thing to do is to be able to put it in your own words so that somebody else can understand it. So there you go. Again, chapter 1.3 has these points, and I might be bringing this up again later. The worst thing you can do is to do this all in one sitting. The best thing you can do is to break it apart. I've identified some ways that maybe help you do that. There may be different ways that work for you, but you don't need to read the whole thing A to Z 3 times. You need to look at the text 3 times, but you're not reading the whole thing 3 times. You're just trying to find the key information and the stuff that you don't understand. That's it.